Chicago was a basketball town in name only. The Bulls were a sideshow. Tickets given away with gas station fill-ups, games played in half-empty arenas, a team buried beneath baseball box scores and Walter Payton headlines. Then,
Michael Jordan.
In 1984, a 21-year-old from Wilmington stepped into the locker room.
Everyone's going to have large expectations for my play, but I'm just going to set expectations for myself and go out and try to contribute and maybe not try to carry the team and just try to fit in and become as one.
Silent and razor thin, with a gold chain, a warm smile, and something no one could quite name yet. He didn't talk legacy. He didn't promise rings. He just played. Harder than anyone. Smarter. Meaner. Within weeks, the air changed. By spring, they called him a god. By fall, Nike gave him wings. But gods aren't born. They're forged through broken bones, silent wars, bitter rivals, and betrayal in boardrooms. Michael Jordan didn't just win. He rewrote the definition. He carried a broke franchise to global fame, scored 63 in Boston Garden, buried Cleveland with a flick of the wrist, took beatings from Detroit until he stopped falling, then made the entire league bend to his will. He gave Chicago 6 banners. He gave the world a blueprint. But behind every parade was tension, a ticking clock, a dynasty built not on trust, but on defiance. And when it ended, it didn't collapse. It was dismantled, deliberately, piece by piece. This is not just about championships. It's about obsession, power, and the price of greatness. This is how the Chicago Bulls became the most feared team in basketball history, and why it couldn't last.
Welcome to the
1984 NBA draft didn't break the internet. There was no internet, no social media countdown, just suits, paperwork, and war rooms filled with scouts hoping they guessed right.
Select Hakeem Olajuwon.
Houston took Hakeem Olajuwon first overall. No one blinked. He was dominant, polished, 7 feet tall. Portland picked next. They already had Clyde Drexler, so they passed on a shooting guard and chose Sam Bowie, a 7-footer with fragile legs and clean footwork. That left Chicago at number 3.
Michael Jordan.
The Bulls were a bottom-feeding team with no direction and even less identity. Their owner was tired of losing money. Their general manager was tired of losing games. So when the skinny 21-year-old from North Carolina was still on the board, they didn't hesitate. Michael Jordan became a Bull. The franchise had drifted into obscurity. The Chicago Stadium was more ghost town than arena. The Bulls' most marketable face was Orlando Woolridge, a high-flying 6'9" forward who could score but couldn't carry. The team barely cracked headlines, let alone expectations. But the moment Jordan hit the court, the air changed. He was something else, something urgent, quick as a blink, smooth like silk over ice. His rookie year wasn't good. It was absurd. 28.2 points per game, explosive transition dunks, mid-air contortions that seemed to pause time. Every night, there was a new highlight, a new moment, a new believer. Nike rolled out a campaign and called it Air Jordan. The name stuck because the world had never seen anyone hang like that before. The Bulls were no longer invisible. They were on fire. But greatness comes with a price. 3 games into his second season, Jordan came down wrong. A routine play, a sudden crack. He broke his left foot, specifically the navicular bone, the kind of injury that can steal careers in silence. Doctors told him to rest. Management agreed. 9 months, no exceptions. But Michael didn't wait. He went home to North Carolina and started playing again, quietly. Full-court pickup games against college kids at UNC. No trainers, no permission, no insurance. Just him, a gym, and a refusal to be ordinary. He hid the games from the Bulls because he knew they'd try to stop him. When he returned to Chicago, He didn't ask. He demanded to play. But Bulls owner Jerry Reinsdorf and GM Jerry Krause, already terrified of re-injury, slapped a hard minutes restriction on him. 7 minutes per half, no wiggle room, no debate. Jordan hated it. Still, they scraped into the playoffs, 30 wins, barely enough to qualify. Their prize? The 67-win Boston Celtics. Larry Bird, Kevin McHale, Robert Parrish, a juggernaut. Game 2, Boston Garden. Michael Jordan explodes. 63 points. He scored every way imaginable. Floaters, mid-range jumpers, off-balance banks, airborne acrobatics. He didn't just play. He danced through double teams, laughed at hand checks, dared defenders to try again. The Celtics won in overtime, but Bird stood in awe and delivered a line that would be quoted for decades. That was God disguised as Michael Jordan. The Bulls were swept. It wasn't close. They were overmatched, outgunned. But no one cared. Not really. Because something deeper had shifted. The scoreboard didn't matter anymore. What mattered was this. In just his second season, injured, limited, doubted, Michael Jordan had stepped into the Lions' den and set it on fire. The Bulls didn't have a roster. They didn't have rings. But they had a star who made 63 points in the Boston Garden feel like a warning shot. Everything was about to change. The Bulls had found their future in Michael Jordan, but in 1986, they were still searching for a way forward. That summer, Jerry Reinsdorf made a move. He hired Doug Collins.
I think I'm a player's coach. I don't yell. I don't scream.
A young, intense coach, just 35 years old. Collins had been a gritty NBA player himself. He understood the hunger Jordan played with. He promised to build a system around him. Jordan was ready. Fully recovered from the broken foot, he tore through the 1986-87 season with an unrelenting fury. 37.1 points per game. Historic. Night after night, he lit up the league like a spark hitting gasoline. 50-point games became routine. 60-point games became rumors of legend. Crowds packed arenas just to watch him breathe. But brilliance had its limits. The Bulls still lost more than they won. No help, no depth, no chance. Jordan was a one-man revolution, and it wasn't enough. Jerry Krause knew Jordan needed a supporting cast, so in 1987, he drafted Scottie Pippen and Horace Grant.
But I think that, Chicago is a great franchise, and probably every player that's sitting down in the audience wants to be a part of it.
I fell in love with the city, Coach Collins and Mr. Krause.
They were projects, raw, wide-eyed, unsure. Pippen had arms like vines and a handle that needed taming. Grant was pure muscle with no polish. At first, they floated at the edges of Jordan's orbit, learning, surviving. Meanwhile, Collins pushed Jordan harder. Every possession ran through him, every shot, every decision. He was MVP and Defensive Player of the Year by 1988, the first player in a generation to dominate both ends of the floor. It was breathtaking. It was unsustainable. The playoffs showed the truth. In 1988, they beat Cleveland in the first round, Jordan playing hero every night. But then they hit a wall against the Detroit Pistons. The bad boys played a different sport. Elbows, forearms, blood under the rim. They invented the Jordan rules. Cut off the lane, force him left, hammer him when he jumps. It wasn't basketball. It was survival. Chicago wasn't ready. The summer of 1988 brought another gear. Jordan sharpened. Pippen and Grant grew stronger. By 1989, Chicago wasn't just hanging around. They were hunting. First came Cleveland again. But this time, the Cavaliers were favored. Deeper roster, home court, better record. But Michael Jordan didn't care about odds. Game 5, final seconds, Bulls down by 1. The ball inbounded to Jordan, who sprinted toward the foul line. Craig Elo chased, leapt desperately. Jordan rose higher, hung in the air just a fraction longer, released, swish. Jordan punched the air as Elo collapsed. It wasn't just a shot, it was a seismic shift. The Bulls weren't underdogs anymore. They were a problem. They rolled over the Knicks. They reached the Eastern Conference Finals. Detroit was waiting. Again. And even though the Bulls pushed them harder than ever, 6 brutal games, it wasn't enough. Not yet. Detroit's grip tightened. Jordan slumped off the floor, exhausted, furious, wounded. Then, the unexpected. Just weeks later, July 10, 1989, Jerry Krause fired Doug Collins. No farewell tour. No time to argue. Gone. In his place, Phil Jackson. Quiet, measured, with a plan to take the ball out of Jordan's hands and give it back to the team. The triangle offense, Tex Winter's brainchild. A system built on spacing, trust, patience.
Triangle is formed between forward 2, guard 1, who has now moved to the corner, and center 5, who forms the apex of the triangle.
Everything Jordan had learned to live without. Michael hated it, but deep down, he knew something had to change. The Pistons weren't going to let him fly over them. He would have to go through them. And the Bulls were about to become something even more dangerous than a superstar with a grudge. They were about to become a real team. Phil Jackson didn't walk into a dynasty. He walked into a standoff. Michael Jordan was the best player in the world. The only player, really, who could pull miracles out of broken plays. He didn't want an offense that told him when to move, when to pass, when to wait. He wanted the ball. He wanted control. But Phil wasn't here to build a team around one man. He was here to build around an idea. The triangle offense wasn't flashy. It wasn't easy. It demanded sacrifice. 5 players moving in harmony, constant motion, reading the defense, not forcing it. To Jordan, it sounded like a leash. To Tex Winter, who sat beside Phil scribbling plays into yellow legal pads, it sounded like salvation. There were arguments, meetings that ended with doors slammed, silent standoffs in practice. Jordan didn't trust systems. He trusted himself. But something started to happen. Scottie Pippen grew more confident with the ball in his hands. Horace Grant became a weapon in the short corner. John Paxson found open looks. Bill Cartwright anchored the post. The ball moved faster. Defenders couldn't load up on Jordan anymore because the threat was everywhere now. The Bulls weren't Michael and the others anymore. They were becoming a machine. Still, transformation wasn't clean. It never is. The 1989-90 season was brutal. The Bulls won 55 games, but every step forward felt like a fistfight. Every loss reopened old doubts. Every win barely covered the friction. They reached the Eastern Conference Finals again, standing once more face to face with their tormentors, the Detroit Pistons. Only this time, the rivalry wasn't just physical, it was personal. The Jordan rules returned, sharper and meaner. Detroit hammered Jordan on every drive, double-teamed him at the elbows, dragged him to the floor on rebounds. Pippen, expected to be the second sword, faltered at the worst moment. In Game 7, he suffered a migraine so blinding he could barely see the basket. He scored just 2 points.
It was, just something that I feel that just came over me, and I just wasn't able to produce. And, I just hope it doesn't happen again.
Jordan tried to carry them, but it wasn't enough. Detroit crushed Chicago, 93-74. Another season shattered. Walking off the floor that night, Jordan wasn't just frustrated. He was humiliated. His teammates looked small. His body ached. His faith in the system wavered. But Phil Jackson saw it differently. The team wasn't broken, it was being hardened. Detroit taught them something they couldn't learn from winning: how to suffer, how to survive. Michael Jordan had given everything he had, yet it still wasn't enough. Therefore, the Bulls had no choice but to evolve or be broken forever. The summer of 1990 wasn't a vacation for Michael Jordan. It was a funeral for weakness. He didn't pout. He didn't point fingers. He went into hiding, into exile, into war with himself. He transformed his body into armor, thicker, stronger, meaner. Weightlifting became a religion. Endurance drills replaced pickup games. If the Pistons wanted a street fight, Jordan would bring a steel jaw and bare fist. The Bulls followed. Pippen trained like a man obsessed. Horace Grant added muscle. The entire roster toughened. They didn't want sympathy. They wanted blood. When the 1990-91 season tipped off, Chicago wasn't just better. They were different. The triangle offense, once clunky and resented, now flowed like a living organism. The ball zipped from wing to post to corner without hesitation. Jordan still dazzled, still soared, but now he didn't have to carry every burden. Pippen was an all-star. Grant was a force. Paxson became deadly in open space. Cartwright took the hits inside. The regular season was a coronation. 61 wins. Jordan won his second MVP. But awards didn't matter. April mattered. May mattered. Detroit mattered. In the Eastern Conference Finals, the Bulls didn't flinch. They didn't whine about the Jordan rules. They absorbed every elbow, every cheap shot. They didn't retaliate with fist. They retaliated with execution. Game 1, Bulls by 8. Game 2, Bulls by 12. Game 3, Bulls by 18. Game 4 was supposed to be a Pistons street brawl. Instead, it became their funeral. With seconds left in the fourth quarter and the Bulls up double digits, Isaiah Thomas, Bill Laimbeer, and several Pistons walked off the court. No handshake, no congratulations, just bitterness and retreat. Cameras caught them slipping away before the final buzzer. And it wasn't just defeat, it was surrender.
This is a big step for us, and we can only go and move up. Right now we're looking forward to the finals and trying to do our best.
In those days, you had to stand up for your rights, and you could without getting in trouble. From the league, from the officiating, from whatever else.
Chicago had exercised its demons, but there was no time to gloat. Ahead, the NBA Finals and Magic Johnson's Los Angeles Lakers. The Lakers weren't just any opponent. They were Hollywood royalty. Showtime. 5 championships. Magic was the face of the league. Michael was the challenger. Game 1 belonged to LA. The Bulls were rattled. Doubts crept in. But Phil Jackson stayed calm. He tweaked the game plan. He put Scottie Pippen on Magic instead of Jordan, an adjustment no one saw coming. In Game 2, Jordan responded with one of the most iconic plays in finals history. A mid-air hand-switching layup that made jaws drop around the world. Left hand, mid-spin, off the glass. Art in motion. The Bulls never looked back. They won 4 straight. They crushed the Dynasty of the West. In the locker room, Jordan clutched the Larry O'Brien trophy to his chest like a man clinging to salvation. He wept into it, burying years of pain, doubt, and failure inside those tears.
Michael, what does it mean to you?
It means so much. Not just for me, but for the team, for the whole city. It's been a 7-year struggle. When I first got into Chicago, we started at the bottom, and every year we just worked harder and harder until we got to it. And it's so gratifying. I'm appreciated so long in my life, for my family, for my kids, everything.
The Bulls were champions, and Michael Jordan was no longer just a scoring machine, or a human highlight reel, or a media phenomenon. He was the best player on the planet, and now he had the crown to prove it. Winning changes everything. Winning a championship, it changes who you are. The Bulls returned home not as scrappy underdogs or Jordan's personal crusade, but as a machine. Sleek, ruthless, expected to dominate. For the first time, they carried the full weight of expectation. Every arena was packed. Every opponent circled their date. Every night became a referendum on greatness. Michael Jordan didn't blink. He came back sharper, hungrier, meaner. The 1991-92 Bulls tore through the league, finishing 67-15, the best record in franchise history. Jordan won his second straight MVP, stacking numbers that looked almost unfair. 30.1 points, 6.4 rebounds, 6.1 assists, 2.3 steals per game. He wasn't just scoring anymore. He was a storm. Pippen elevated too, blossoming into a two-way nightmare for opponents. Together they moved like twin blades, one slicing, one shielding. But perfection attracts enemies, and the Knicks were waiting. Pat Riley had arrived in New York, bringing the bruises of his Lakers past, but stripping away the glamour. These Knicks weren't Showtime. They were blunt force trauma in jerseys. Charles Oakley, Patrick Ewing, Anthony Mason, guards who fouled harder than most centers. The 1992 Eastern Conference semifinals became a bar fight disguised as basketball. New York punched first, stealing Game 1 in Chicago.
Now remember the energy that got us here. We've got to rebuild the momentum as you guys had to go big. Got about half an hour here with the momentum.
But the Bulls answered, taking Game 2 to even the series. The games turned into wrestling matches. Elbows, forearms, blood. Echoes of old doubts crept in. Was the old pain coming back? Jordan refused. He dragged the series into the mud, matching violence with violence. He drove into bodies, took hits, rose again. In Game 7, with the season hanging by a thread, Jordan delivered one of his grittiest masterpieces. 42 points, 12 rebounds, brutal defense, zero mercy. The Bulls crushed the Knicks by 29 points. Their reward? Another war. The Eastern Conference Finals against Cleveland. This wasn't the Cavaliers of old, the ones Jordan had humiliated with the shot. This Cleveland team was loaded, young, hungry, bigger in every position. But size doesn't matter when the will is broken. The Bulls throttled them in 6 games. Waiting in the finals, the Portland Trail Blazers. It was supposed to be the clash of the Titans, Jordan versus Drexler, MVP versus runner-up, 2 high-flying guards at the peak of their powers. In Game 1, Jordan ended the conversation before it even started. He torched Portland with 6 three-pointers in the first half. After the 6th splashed through the net, Jordan turned to the broadcast table and shrugged, as if to say, "Even I can't explain this anymore." The Bulls took the series in 6 games, a second title, a second Finals MVP. Jordan stood taller, Pippen smiled wider, Chicago roared. But there was no time to rest. That summer, Jordan and Pippen boarded a plane to Barcelona, joining the first U.S. Olympic team made up entirely of NBA players. The Dream Team: Magic, Bird, Barkley, Ewing, Malone, Stockton. Legends playing together, steamrolling every opponent by double digits, turning basketball into a global obsession. Jordan didn't lose a single game, but he lost something else: time. No offseason, no chance to breathe, no real escape from the weight on his shoulders. By the time he returned to Chicago in the fall, he wasn't just a 2-time champion, he was a living myth. Every camera, every endorsement, every ticket sold orbiting around him. Beneath the trophies and celebrations, something invisible crept into the Bulls' foundation: exhaustion. Winning was no longer the goal, it was the expectation. And the price for chasing it was about to get heavier. The crown was heavier now. 2 championships, Olympic gold, global fame beyond anything the NBA had ever seen. Michael Jordan had climbed every mountain the sport could offer. But instead of peace, there was pressure. Instead of joy, exhaustion. The 1992-93 Bulls looked strong on paper, but worn thin in spirit. Jordan, Pippen, and the core had never stopped moving. No offseason, no real break after Barcelona. Their bodies kept going, but something inside had started to fray. Chicago finished the season 57-25, still a juggernaut, but not the same ruthless machine from a year before. Some nights they coasted, some nights they clawed. Jordan still led the league in scoring at 32.6 points per game, but the gaps were showing. He wasn't flying over defenders anymore, he was grinding through them. Off the court, the storm was gathering. Jordan's gambling habits, once a curious quirk, became national news. First came the whispers, casinos, golf courses, high-stakes bets. Then the headlines. In the spring of 1993, a San Diego businessman named Richard Esquinas published a book claiming Jordan owed him over $1.2 million from gambling debts.
Do you have a gambling problem?
No, I enjoy it. It's a hobby.
The media frenzy erupted overnight. The timing couldn't have been worse. In the Eastern Conference Finals against the Knicks, reports surfaced that Jordan had been seen gambling late into the night at an Atlantic City casino before Game 2. Photos splashed across front pages.
It's attacked in my private life, and I really didn't like it. I don't agree with it.
TV anchors questioned his focus. Columnists asked whether the king had lost his edge. New York smelled blood. They took the first 2 games at Madison Square Garden, pounding the Bulls with physical defense and relentless pressure. Suddenly, the defending champions were down 0-2. The walls that Jordan had spent nearly a decade climbing over now looked like they might bury him. He answered the only way he knew how. In Game 3 back in Chicago, Jordan played angry, controlled fury. He attacked the rim, absorbed punishment, and kept coming. He dropped 22 points in the first half, setting the tone for the series. The Bulls clawed out a win, then another, then another. Game 5 in New York was the turning point, an ugly, brutal battle. Jordan put up 29 points under the brightest, harshest lights of his career, silencing a Madison Square Garden crowd that had come ready to celebrate his fall. By Game 6, the Bulls had flipped the series entirely. They closed out the Knicks at home, bloodied, bruised, unbroken. Jordan was still standing, but there was no time to exhale. Waiting in the finals were the Phoenix Suns, led by Charles Barkley, the newly crowned MVP. Phoenix was young, fast, confident. Barkley was playing the best basketball of his life. They had home court advantage, they had hunger, they had depth. What they didn't have was Michael Jordan. In Game 1, Jordan attacked mercilessly, dropping 31 points. Game 2, 42 points. When Phoenix punched back with a triple overtime win in Game 3, one of the longest and wildest finals games ever played, Jordan responded the only way he knew how. Game 4, 55 points. The second highest scoring performance in NBA Finals history at the time. He didn't just score, he carved Phoenix apart, play after play, without hesitation. By Game 6, the Bulls were battered, but within reach of a third straight title. In the final minutes, Phoenix led 98-96. The Suns packed the paint, daring Chicago to find a way. Jordan brought the ball up. He swung it to Pippen. Pippen attacked the lane, pulled defenders with him, and kicked it to Horace Grant near the baseline, and fired the ball out to John Paxson, who was waiting behind the three-point line, just right of center. Paxton caught, released, swish. The Bulls took a 99-98 lead with 3.9 seconds left. Phoenix had one last chance. Kevin Johnson drove the lane, but Horace Grant met him and erased the shot. Time expired. 3 straight championships. Jordan stood in the chaos, arms raised, exhausted, victorious. The confetti fell again, The cameras flashed again. But something inside him didn't celebrate. Not fully. Because this time, the journey hadn't refueled him. It had drained him. All the battles, all the victories, all the applause, they no longer filled the spaces they once did. Something was broken now, and Michael Jordan knew it. He just hadn't said it out loud yet.
Can you imagine it? I can.
The summer of 1993 was supposed to be a coronation. 3 straight championships. Finals MVPs stacked like trophies on a mantle. Michael Jordan had nothing left to prove to anyone. Not the league, not to the critics, not even to himself. But peace never came.
Today it is with regret that I advise you that a body located in Bennettsville, South Carolina has been positively identified as the body of Mr. James Jordan.
On July 23, 1993, James Jordan pulled off a North Carolina highway to take a nap in his red Lexus. Somewhere near Lumberton, beneath the heavy summer heat, 2 teenagers approached his car with a stolen gun. They shot him, dumped his body in a swamp, left him there to rot. He wasn't found for weeks. By the time the news reached Michael, the world knew first. James Jordan had been more than a father. He was Michael's compass, his anchor, the voice that kept him human when the world tried to turn him into a god. The murder ripped a hole through him that nothing could fill. Rumors swirled in the weeks that followed. Whispers that James's death was somehow tied to Michael's gambling. Theories with no proof, no mercy. It didn't matter. The damage was done. The grief, the exhaustion, the constant microscope. It finally broke him. On October 6, 1993, at a crowded press conference, Michael Jordan announced his retirement from basketball. 23 years old when he entered the league, 30 years old when he walked away. He wasn't limping off the stage. He was sprinting from it.
It's time for me to move away from the game of basketball.
He said he had nothing left to prove. Said the game no longer challenged him.
I don't believe he should continue playing. He's come to a point in his life where he needs to go and do something else.
Most of the world didn't believe it. The NBA reeled. Overnight, TV ratings cratered. The Bulls were left stunned, leaderless. They started the 1993-94 season without the man who had made them matter, without their engine, without their soul. Scottie Pippen stepped into the void. He played the best basketball of his life. Career highs in points, rebounds, assists. He led the Bulls to 55 wins and dragged them to the second round of the playoffs. But even greatness has limits. In the 1994 Eastern Conference semifinals against the Knicks, with the score tied and seconds left in Game 3, Coach Phil Jackson drew up a final play for Tony Kukoc, not Pippen. Scottie refused to go back in the game. He sat on the bench, arms crossed, while Kukoc hit the game winner. Their Bulls survived that night, but something cracked. You don't just lose a legend and keep walking like nothing happened. Against the Knicks, they fought. They clawed. They even had a chance to steal the series. But a phantom foul call against Pippen in Game 5, one that even New York media admitted was suspicious, flipped the momentum. The Bulls eventually fell in 7 brutal games. No Jordan, no finals. The dynasty wasn't dead yet, but it was unrecognizable. Across the country, Jordan wore a Birmingham Barons baseball uniform, riding buses, swinging at minor league curveballs, smiling for cameras, but lost somewhere underneath. For the first time in a decade, the NBA world spun without Michael Jordan at its center. But the storm he had created wasn't gone. It was just waiting.
Like his heart is here, his body's here, and he is very happy competing at this level, trying to get to the major leagues.
Michael Jordan was gone from the NBA, but he wasn't sitting still. He was in Birmingham, Alabama, chasing a different dream, wearing cleats instead of sneakers, swinging a bat instead of a fist. The Birmingham Barons, Double-A minor league baseball. Long bus rides, small stadiums. cheap motels. Jordan didn't care. In his mind, he wasn't escaping basketball. He was honoring a promise to his father and maybe to a younger version of himself. He struggled badly. Fastballs blew past him. Breaking balls spun him into knots. He batted .202, hit 3 home runs, struck out 114 times. But he showed up early, stayed late, ran the bases like every sprint mattered. Never asked for shortcuts, never asked for pity. In the lonely stretches of those bus rides, somewhere between forgotten towns and empty ballparks, the fire began to return. Meanwhile, in Chicago, the Bulls fought to move forward. Pippen carried the load. Kukoc grew into a weapon. Phil Jackson willed them to compete. But it was clear the NBA was changing without Jordan. Hakeem Olajuwon led the Rockets to a title in 1994. New stars rose. Shaquille O'Neal, Anthony Hardaway. Young wolves sniffing around the throne Jordan had left vacant. And then came the strike. In the spring of 1995, a labor dispute between Major League Baseball players and owners froze the game. Spring training was canceled. Minor league seasons were endangered. Players faced uncertain futures. Jordan had a decision to make. He started showing up at the Berto Center, the Bulls' practice facility, under the radar. At first, just casual workouts, shooting drills, light scrimmages. But the rust fell off faster than anyone expected. The instinct was still there. The elevation, the precision. It was Pippen who pushed first. "Come back," he said. "We need you." Jordan didn't answer right away. He hated half measures. If he returned, he needed to be certain. For weeks, he stayed quiet. Then,
"I'm back." That's all Jordan said on Saturday. That was really all Jordan needed to say.
On March 18, 1995, a 2-word fax landed in the newsrooms across the country. "I'm back." No speeches, no interviews, no staged comeback tour. Just a fax. 2 words, and the world stopped spinning. The very next day, wearing the unfamiliar number 45 jersey, Jordan walked onto the court in Indianapolis against the Pacers. His touch was rusty, his legs not fully conditioned, but the crowd buzzed every time he touched the ball. The camera lens followed his every breath. He scored 19 points, missed shots he used to bury, looked mortal, looked human, but something was awake again. The Bulls surged down the stretch, fueled by Jordan's return. They clawed into the playoffs, facing the young, electric Orlando Magic, led by Shaq and Penny Hardaway. Jordan battled. He wheeled. He pulled Magic out of thin air, even dropping 40 points in Game 5. But the timing wasn't there. The chemistry wasn't there. The old invincibility wasn't there. In Game 6, it was over. The Magic knocked the Bulls out, ending Jordan's comeback season early. For the first time since 1990, Michael Jordan walked off the court in defeat. But there was no sadness in his eyes, only calculation. He knew what needed to happen next. The old Jordan wasn't coming back. He was building something new, and the league had no idea what was about to hit them. The loss to Orlando didn't just sting. It branded itself onto Michael Jordan's soul. All summer, he vanished into the shadows, into empty gyms, sweaty weight rooms, silent practice courts. He wasn't rebuilding the old Jordan. He was creating something meaner, harder, stronger. 5 a.m. weightlifting sessions, endless drills, pickup games that turned into fistfights. He refused to lose again. Not to Shaq, not to Penny, not to anyone. And he wasn't the only one changing. Jerry Krause saw the opening too. He traded for Dennis Rodman, a move that made everyone flinch. Rodman was chaos incarnate, a rebounding savant, a defensive genius, but unstable, volatile, a grenade with a half-pulled pin. He had clashed violently with the Pistons, burned bridges with the Spurs, and dyed his hair every color except ordinary. But Krause didn't care. Phil Jackson didn't blink, and Jordan, after a brief, ice-cold meeting, gave his blessing. If they could harness Rodman's madness, the Bulls wouldn't just be good, they would be unstoppable. The 1995-96 Chicago Bulls weren't chasing respect, they were hunting history. Jordan had shed the number 45 jersey and reclaimed number 23. His legs were back, his lift, his edge. Pippen was in his absolute prime, smoother, smarter, deadlier. And Rodman? Rodman was the hammer, smashing opposing big men off the glass, diving for loose balls, throwing himself into every fight. From opening night, it was clear nobody could touch them. The Bulls started the season 23-2. They won 13 straight on the road. They crushed good teams and humiliated bad ones. Their offense flowed like a symphony. Their defense closed like a steel trap. Jordan averaged 30.4 points, won another MVP, and reclaimed his throne without mercy. Pippen nearly averaged a triple-double some nights. Rodman led the league in rebounding by a mile, grabbing balls over centers half a foot taller. They closed the regular season at 72-10, the best record in NBA history, a mark nobody thought would ever fall. But 72 wins means nothing without the trophy. In the playoffs, they dismantled Miami, outlasted the Knicks, gutted the Magic in a cold-blooded 4-game sweep, settling old debts in silence. And in the finals, they faced the Seattle Supersonics, a team built to challenge them. Gary Payton, the glove, the league's best perimeter defender. Shawn Kemp, a walking explosion, dunking through gravity itself. For the first few games, Jordan smothered Seattle before they could even breathe. The Bulls jumped out to a 3-0 lead, putting one hand on the trophy by halftime of Game 3. Seattle fought back, stealing Games 4 and 5 as Payton finally was unleashed onto Jordan. The glove frustrated him, battered him, slowed him just enough. But there was no stopping destiny. In Game 6, June 16, 1996, on Father's Day, Michael Jordan completed the comeback. The Bulls closed out Seattle 87-75.
This is for Daddy.
Jordan collapsed onto the locker room floor, cradling the ball, sobbing uncontrollably. Not because of the championship, because his father wasn't there to see it. 3 years after James Jordan's murder, Michael had returned to the top of the world, alone but unbroken. A 4th title, another Finals MVP, a team etched into history. 72 wins, a ring, an empire. The Bulls weren't just champions anymore. They were legends. The Bulls had conquered everything. 72 wins. A championship for the ages. Michael Jordan back on top. But history doesn't just weigh you down from the outside. It crushes you from within. The 96-97 Bulls weren't chasing greatness anymore. They were defending it every night under a microscope that never blinked. Winning didn't feel like a celebration. It felt like survival. From the outside, they still looked invincible. They started 42-6. They finished 69-13, just 3 wins shy of their own record. Jordan was still Jordan. Pippen remained the ultimate weapon, filling every crack, doing whatever the moment needed. And Rodman? Rodman waged his own private wars. On the court, he led the NBA in rebounding again. Off the court, he spiraled deeper into chaos. Suspensions, absences, Vegas trips. He dyed his hair every color rebellion could imagine. He married himself in a wedding dress. He was a headline machine barely held together by a basketball court. The Bulls survived it all, but the cracks were no longer invisible. Behind closed doors, Jerry Krause, the Bulls' general manager, made it clear. He believed the Dynasty's best days were already behind them. He believed he could rebuild faster, cheaper, smarter.
Jerry started the negotiations last year with me.
Whispers leaked that Phil Jackson's days were numbered, that Pippen could be traded, that Rodman was expendable. And Krause's quote, "Players don't win championships, organizations do."
What I said was that players and coaches alone don't win championships, that organizations do.
Was gasoline poured over a raging fire. Jordan never forgot it, never forgave it. Every practice, every press conference, every playoff game became something personal, not just against opponents, but against the very people upstairs. By spring, the Bulls limped into the playoffs, bruised and battered. They didn't dominate, they endured, battling past the Bullets, outlasting the Hawks, gritting through the heat. Their reward? A final showdown with the Utah Jazz. Karl Malone, John Stockton, a team built on discipline, toughness, and perfect execution. Malone had just been named MVP, barely edging out Jordan, a slight he would not forgive. The series was brutal. Every possession felt like trench warfare. The team split the first 4 games, and then Game 5, Salt Lake City. Jordan woke up violently ill, flu symptoms, dehydration, vomiting. Doctors told him not to play. He played anyway. He dragged himself across the court like a man hunted by ghosts, pale, dripping, gasping for air. He scored 38 points. He hit the go-ahead 3 and then collapsed into Scottie Pippen's arms with less than a minute left. The Bulls stole Game 5, the flu game, one of the most iconic performances in sports history. 3 nights later, back home in Chicago, the Bulls stood 1 possession away from another championship. The game was tied 86-86, 28 seconds left. Steve Kerr brought the ball up the court, cautious but calm. He passed to Scottie Pippen on the left wing. Pippen waited, found Jordan at the top of the key. Utah blitzed him immediately, double team, suffocating pressure. Jordan didn't force it, he trusted. He fired the ball back to Steve Kerr, curling into open space near the free throw line. Kerr caught, rose, released. Swish. Bulls 88, Jazz 86. On Utah's final desperation inbound, Scottie Pippen tipped a pass away. Tony Kukoc scooped it up and raced for a thunderous breakaway dunk as the buzzer blared. Final score, 90-86. The Bulls were champions again. 5 titles.
Michael Jordan, 1997 Finals MVP.
Jordan's 5th Finals MVP. Another parade, another dynasty layer carved into stone. But beneath the banners and champagne, the fractures had widened. This wasn't a family anymore. It was a final march toward an ending everyone could see coming, and no one could stop. The last dance had already begun.
I do sincerely believe that organizations as a whole win.
Have a sense of respect for the people who've laid the groundwork so that you could be a profitable organization.
This will be Phil's last year as the coach of the Bulls. At the conclusion of the year, we'll look towards the future.
It didn't start with a loss. It started with a deadline. Before the 1997-98 season even tipped off, Jerry Krause made it clear. I don't care if Phil Jackson goes 82-0, he's not coming back. Phil was out, which meant, by extension, Michael Jordan was out too.
As it may be, I have choices, and I will not choose to play for another coach.
Jordan said it plainly, I'm not playing for another coach. The dynasty was officially living on borrowed time. The players knew it, the coaches knew it. The fans didn't, at least not yet. Inside the Bulls locker room, the season was nicknamed The Last Dance, a funeral march disguised as a championship tour. Scottie Pippen started the season in open rebellion, angry over a low-paying contract he had long outperformed, furious at Krause's attempts to trade him. He delayed surgery on his injured foot until right before training camp, not to get healthy for the team, to make a point. Without Pippen, the Bulls stumbled early. Jordan carried the weight alone, again. Every night, the media swarmed. Every practice was a feeding frenzy. Every small crack became a headline. Pippen eventually returned in January, and slowly, the the Bulls steadied the ship. Jordan, as always, refused to let them sink. He won his 5th regular season MVP at 35 years old, averaging 28.7 points per game, controlling games not just with athleticism, but with cold-blooded precision. The Bulls finished 62-20. They weren't the same sleek machine of 1996. They were older, slower, beat up, but they were still alive. In the playoffs, they tore through New Jersey, survived a brutal 7-game war against the Indiana Pacers, the toughest Eastern Conference series of Jordan's career, pushed their bodies to the limit just to get one last shot at glory. The finals brought a familiar enemy, the Utah Jazz. Karl Malone, John Stockton, Jeff Hornacek. A team just as desperate for a ring as Chicago was desperate to end on their terms. The series was a slugfest. The Bulls stole Game 2 in Utah behind Jordan's clutch jumper. They fought off the Jazz in Game 3 with a record-setting 96-54 demolition, the fewest points ever scored in an NBA Finals game. But the Bulls were bleeding. Scottie Pippen's back gave out early in Game 6. Every move was agony, every step a gamble. He could barely stand, barely breathe. Yet he stayed on the floor, a decoy, a shadow of himself, just to give Jordan a chance. Jordan didn't ask for help. He took over. In the final minute, down by 3, Jordan scored an acrobatic layup to cut the lead to 1. On Utah's next possession, he stalked Karl Malone from the blind side, ripped the ball clean out of his hands. No timeout, no hesitation. Jordan dribbled slowly up the floor. Calm, calculating. He sized up Byron Russell. One crossover, one lean, one perfect release. The ball hung in the air for a heartbeat, then ripped through the net. Bulls 87, Jazz 86. 5.2 seconds left. Utah missed at the buzzer. The Bulls had won. 6 championships in 8 years. A second three-peat. Jordan's 6th Finals MVP. The Dynasty's final masterpiece. Jordan stood at center court, one arm raised, frozen in that final pose. The last image of his Bulls career. He walked away a champion. The Bulls walked away into history. Not with a collapse, not with a slow fade, but with a final shot, a final steal, a final ring. A perfect ending that would never come again. The last dance was over. There was a parade. 500,000 people flooded Grant Park. The city roared, a sea of red and black. Jordan stood at the podium, holding the 6th trophy. It was the perfect ending on the surface, but underneath, the dynasty was already being dismantled. Jerry Krause had made it clear long before the finals even started, this was Phil Jackson's last season, no matter what. No contract extension, no second chance. No Phil meant no Jordan. No Jordan meant no dynasty. Scottie Pippen knew he was being shopped before the season even tipped off. Underpaid, underappreciated, and injured, he wasn't coming back either. Dennis Rodman, the wild card who had made them unbeatable, wasn't in the future plans either. The celebration in Grant Park was real, but it was also a funeral. The dismantling began almost immediately. Phil Jackson resigned. Scottie Pippen was traded to Houston in a sign-and-trade deal. Dennis Rodman was released. Steve Kerr was traded to San Antonio. Luke Longley was sent to Phoenix.
Michael Jordan always said he wanted to retire on top, and so he has. Today he made official the story that broke Monday night, that he would not return to the Bulls after 13 seasons, 6 championships, and countless game highlights.
And Michael Jordan, once again, walked away. Not because the game had passed him, not because he couldn't dominate anymore, but because the soul of the dynasty had been gutted from within. He announced his retirement on January 13, 1999. This time, there was no comeback in Chicago waiting for him. The Bulls collapsed overnight, from 62 wins to 13, from sold-out arenas to empty seats, from dynasty to dust. Jerry Krause believed he could rebuild it again. He never did. The players scattered across the league. Phil Jackson resurfaced in Los Angeles and built another empire. 5 more championships with Kobe Bryant and Shaquille O'Neal. Steve Kerr found rings in San Antonio and years later crafted his own dynasty in Golden State. Scottie Pippen battled through injuries in Houston and Portland, chasing one last ring that never came. Dennis Rodman spun into chaos and tabloid fame. And Jordan? Jordan returned years later with the Washington Wizards. Still brilliant, still unrelenting, but it was never the same. The magic wasn't in the jersey. It had been in the people, the bond, the fight, the trust. And once that was broken, there was no rebuilding it. The Chicago Bulls didn't lose their dynasty. They chose to end it. Not at the hands of an opponent, not because of time, but because of pride, because of power, because of the belief that dynasties are easy to recreate. They are not. The 1991 to 1998 Chicago Bulls didn't just win basketball games. They changed the world. 6 championships, 6 rings, 6 impossible seasons stitched together by obsession, brilliance, loyalty, and an unrelenting refusal to break. The greatest dynasty the game had ever seen ended not by defeat, but by choice. The banners still hang, 6 of them swaying quietly above the empty court. The dynasty is gone, the players are gone, the moments are gone. But the echoes remain. A reminder that for 8 impossible years, one team rewrote what greatness could be. Not with promises, not with polish, but with blood, sweat, brilliance, and the stubborn belief that nothing was ever over until they said it was. The Chicago Bulls didn't just win championships. They built a legend, one that will never be duplicated. Not by organizations, not by plans, not by luck. Because greatness isn't assembled, it's born, fought for, and when it leaves, it doesn't come back. It lives only in the banners and in the memories of those who witnessed it. The last dance, forever.